Yo, what's good E7 fam? Pat here, back with another how to play video guide. This one's going to be on the girl who was raised by mice, Choux. As with all of these how to play guides, I'll be going super in depth and trying to cover almost everything you could want to know about the character, including things like Choux' stats, her skills, a possible equipment build for you to try out in PvP, as well as matchup knowledge for PvP if that is your thing. With the introduction out of the way now, let's talk about Choux' stats. Choux is an ice warrior of the Capricorn zodiac symbol. She shares a stat line with Ken, Ravi, Mediator Queric, and Dark Corvus. Taking a closer look at her stat line, she has 966 attack, 7,323 health, 102 speed, 657 defense, 15% critical hit chance, 150% critical hit damage, 5% dual attack chance, and no effectiveness or effect resistance. This is the highest base health in all of Epic 7, as well as a fairly respectable defense score. But other than that, Choux is seriously lacking in almost every other stat. As a bit of trivia before moving on to the skill section, in the English dub of Epic 7, Choux is voiced by Carly Craig, who we have discussed previously on this channel in How to Play Alencia. In the Japanese dub of Epic 7, however, Choux is voiced by Naganawa Maria, who you can hear as Nazuna Hiwatashi from Studio Trigger's BNA, as well as Kana from the smash hit Miss Kobayashi's Dragon Maid. Choux' S1 is Chop. You acquire 1 focus upon use, and it has a 0.5x attack multiplier. Additionally, it has a 10% max health multiplier. This move increases Choux' combat readiness by 15 to 20%, depending on Molagora. If Choux lands a critical hit, she will gain an additional focus stack. Overall, this is a fairly standard S1. It has multipliers comparable to a lot of other health scaling bruisers. It's not really exceptional. It's not one of the higher ones like Apocalypse Ravi, for example. So yeah, at the end of the day, fairly average as far as damage goes for these types of heroes. I think what makes it kind of decent is the 15 to 20% combat readiness on it. That's obviously something that's very good. It's on characters like Hua Young as well as Landy. Even a character like Dian has that. So again, that's probably the best part of the move overall. If you remember how I talked about this character in her buffs from a few weeks ago in the first thoughts and initial impressions video, I'm just really not super in love with this skill whatsoever. Although it is significantly better than I thought it was in that video, and we'll talk about why that is in the very next section when we talk about Choux' exclusive equipment. Choux' S2 is the hilariously named Whoosh. It has a 3-turn cooldown. This move has a 0.5x attack multiplier, as well as an 11% max health multiplier. It is a single target attack that penetrates 70% of the target's defense. When Choux has 5 or more focus, this move consumes all focus to increase the damage multiplier to 15% of Choux' max health. Additionally, the cooldown of Whoosh is reset. Whoosh is honestly the best skill on Choux, no questions asked. With the changes, Whoosh does enough damage that it can outright kill many of the game's squishier heroes in one hit. Hell, a well-built Choux can pretty much kill, some knights or come very close in one hit as well. I know I've come very, very close to killing some of the game's tankiest characters with this move. It's, in its current state, an absolutely amazing single target nuke, and it's the best part, again, about this character. Choux' S3 is one of the worst named skills in all of Epic 7, and that is Help Me, Cream. You acquire 3 focus upon use, as well as acquire 3 souls. It has a 4 to 5 turn cooldown, depending on Molagora. It has a 0.5x multiplier, as well as a 15% max HP multiplier. This is the same, by the way, as Alencia's Genesis, which is another AoE skill on an HP scaling bruiser, so you know you're in good company there. This move grants critical hit resistance to all allies for 2 turns, as well as grants immunity to Choux for 2 turns. While this skill is on cooldown, after an ally other than Choux is attacked, there is a 20% chance that she will counterattack with her S1 Chop. The last part of the S3, which is the passive component that was added in the most recent round of buffs, is something that should look incredibly familiar to some of you. This is very akin to the Iron Strike portion of Rem's S2 passive, which we just talked about in How to Play Rem just a few weeks ago. While Iron Strike is amazing since it's AoE, here you're only getting Chop. Chop as a counterattack is honestly fairly mediocre when you compare it to whatever Rem gets. That said, when it's combined with Choux' exclusive equipment, which we will be talking about in the next section, it actually somehow can be even more backbreaking than Rem's Iron Strike if you can actually believe it. Choux' Soulburn grants an extra turn at the cost of 20 souls on her S1 Chop. I don't think I really have to explain whether or not this skill is actually good. At this point, you probably should be well aware. Extra turn soul burns are almost always insanely good. Here is no exception. When we talk about the exclusive equipment, you'll realize that soul burning Chop is actually pretty backbreaking and honestly very scary for your opponent. So yes, very, very good soul burn, especially if you're trying to close out a game or you're trying to get to the critical hit resist from her S3. When it comes to Molagora priorities, I definitely think you should be maxing the S2 Fwoosh first because it is, again, the best part about the character. It is her highest damaging skill, and you will be using it early and often. So definitely max this one out first. After that, you want to max Chop because of the extra combat readiness, as well as the fact that this is the move you're going to be countering with most often. That means it is your primary source of damage, so you should have it maxed out. After that, you can focus on the S3 if you so choose. I find that even getting the cooldown isn't really super amazing. The only real reason you want to just take this all the way to the max is because she is a damage dealer, and honestly, you really should have her at plus 15 at the end of the day. But if you don't really want to invest in the S3, that's probably fine at the end of the day. Before moving on to the character build section, we have to first talk about Choux' exclusive equipment, Snowy Mountain Horn. As always, I'm assuming you have a 10-speed Snowy Mountain Horn for all calculations that I do in this video. Truth be told, I totally forgot that this exclusive equipment existed when I did my review of Choux in my first thoughts and initial impressions video talking about her buffs a few weeks back. It wasn't until many of you reminded me that this exclusive equipment existed that I decided to give the character a once-over and kind of re-evaluate her. And boy, am I glad that I did, because the first exclusive equipment, which makes it so that when you use the S1 Chop, if a critical hit is made, there is a 40% chance to activate Fwoosh. That's nuts. That makes it so that whenever Choux gets her Elbrus Ritual style counter that she got as part of her buffs, there's a good chance that she's going to activate Fwoosh, which is the best part of the kit. The S3 has mediocre damage as well as just the critical hit resist buff, which is nice, but Chop really wasn't it. Now knowing that Chop leads into Fwoosh 40% of the time off of all of the counters that this character is going to throw out is amazing, because now you're looking at doing like 20k plus damage to some of these characters, and that can outright kill certain heroes such as Hua Young. This first exclusive equipment is the main reason that we're making How to Play Choux. She's a really good pocket pick thanks to this first exclusive equipment. For completeness sake, let's go over the other options though. The second one changes it so that the damage done by Fwoosh is increased by 20%, which is nice, obviously, but Fwoosh already does a ton of damage. You would rather be able to just get more Fwooshes over the course of a given game with the first exclusive equipment. And the third exclusive equipment, Help Me Cream, grants immunity to all allies for 2 turns after using it, as opposed to just giving Choux immunity for 2 turns. Again, nice to have. Might have some applications somewhere in, like, say, Abyss. I doubt Hall of Trials it would come into play. But other than, like, very, very, and I mean very niche PvE uses, I don't see really a use for this one. That first exclusive equipment, again, is the one I think you really want, especially because what Choux excels at is going to be a PvP counter pick, and that's really what enables her. There really isn't much else to say about Choux that I didn't say in the previous section with her exclusive equipment. Choux' first exclusive equipment, along with the 70% defense penetration buff on Fwoosh, allow her to absolutely dunk characters out of nowhere. Just look at the footage on your screen and you'll see exactly what I'm talking about. There really isn't much value in this character if you're looking for someone for PvE. However, those of you who are looking for a particularly potent blue bruiser that can excel against characters like Hua Yang or Bellion, or even someone who might have skin in the game against cleave style strategies, I highly encourage you to give Choux a look. She may have been a benchwarmer for almost the entirety of her career, and I hesitate to really call her a top tier character, but she's a damn good counterpick, and she's definitely worth a build, if for no other reason than to watch her pop off and hurl S2s like there's no tomorrow. The only build that we're going to be talking about in this video is as a counterpick DPS that's going to be Choux on a counter set with a critical hit chance offset. There are other builds that you can play for Choux. For example, there is a speed set Choux, but they are all roughly similar to the same desired stats that I have here in this section. If you wanted to play a speed Choux, just add 20 to 30 more speed to what I have listed. Critical hit chance is going to be the 2-piece set because that is the hardest stat for us to get here on Choux. If you have a bunch of imprints, then you can consider other offsets like health set, defense set, or even penetration set if you so choose. Taking a look at the desired stats, I have 1,764 attack. That is Choux' base attack with an I-90 weapon as well as the preferred artifact. Defense, I have 1,200. This is very similar to Apocalypse Robbie, although if you want a tankier Choux, you can go for 1,350 defense or 1,500 defense if you want an extremely tanky Choux, although it will come at the cost of either speed or damage, so keep that in mind. For health, I have 22k. Ideally, I would like to have 24k. That gives us a bit more bulk as well as a bit more damage, so I'd really like that, but not everyone can hit those really high HP thresholds on the character. So for most of you, I think 22k is a fairly solid starting point. For speed, I have 185. Usually counter characters are between 170 and 200. I think this is a fairly obvious middle ground here at 185. I personally am playing 164 at the moment, and that is a bit too slow. I have lost a lot of games because my Choux is too slow and cannot get her S3 off in a timely fashion. So in the future, I'll be looking to up my speed to around this 185 mark. Looking at the critical hit chance, I'm on 100% critical hit chance. More so than other characters, you really want to make sure you have 100% critical hit chance, 99% at the lowest. You want that extra focus from the S1, and you want to make sure you're maximizing the chance that you get the extra proc on the exclusive equipment. So make sure, more than anything else, that critical hit chance is maxed out on this character. Critical hit damage is 270%. Although, as always, if you can get higher, by all means, you are welcome to do so. Taking a look at the right side, I'm on a crit damage necklace, although if you're struggling to hit the critical hit chance requirement, you can use a crit hit chance necklace as well. For the ring, I'm on an HP percentage ring for not only the bulk, but also because we're an HP scaling bruiser, so it gives us the most amount of damage. The boots are speed because we want to take turns in a timely fashion. Looking at the artifact, I'm on a Symbol of Unity because it's just a rock solid artifact that's just good at all points in the game, although Draco Plate might be a better option for many of you. Draco Plate for me is occupied by Rimuru Tempest, and not everyone has Draco Plate, so that is why I chose a Symbol of Unity. There are other options you can also use on Choux, including her own artifact Snow Crystal, because it has great synergy with her S3 and the critical hit resistance that it provides. You will get a ton of extra combat readiness. Durandal is very much the same thing. Choux is going to be a slower counter-based hero, so therefore extra combat readiness is always good because it'll help her get her S3 off again in a timely fashion. You'll note that I did not include Sigurd Sight. That is because it is a highly coveted artifact by many warriors in the game, and pretty much most of the viable warriors are looking for that artifact, so it would be nice to have a character that is not really trying to take that Sigurd Scythe. Rem, for example, doesn't really function well without Sigurd Scythe. Choux has built-in lifesteal on her S2, so she doesn't need it as badly, so therefore I decided to go with either something like a Symbol of Unity or Draco Plate. You can use Sigurd Scythe. I just think it's not the best use of your limited amount of Sigurd Scythes that you probably have on your account. Looking at the per piece average, I have 18% health, 12% critical hit chance, 10% critical hit damage, and some amount of speed or defense per piece. That is going to be 6 average speed per piece, as well as 7% defense average per piece. Because we need 5 stats and there's only 4 you can have per piece, you're going to have to massively exceed one of the stat lines somewhere in order to make the math work out for you. That's why, again, I recommended looking into a critical hit chance necklace if this is a struggle for you. When it comes to teammates, you're for sure going to want to pair Choux with some form of mitigation because she is a much slower character and will take a lot of punishment until she gets to her very first turn. The best options for this are going to be Adventurer Roz as well as Troublemaker Crozet. Adventurer Roz provides not only a defense buff for your Choux, but with his new passive provides a massive barrier as well, which will make it very difficult for your opponents to focus fire the Choux, and you'll probably get a ton of counterattacks in return if they actually do end up trying to go into her anyway. If for some reason Choux is also the highest attack character on your team, you can cash in on Roz's S2 command strike for even more value out of the character. Troublemaker Crozet is pretty much at this point the game's premier mitigation source. I plug him in this section almost all the time because he really just is that good. If you haven't built him, he has a whopping 40% damage share. He has a cleanse, a CR push. He's got built-in stuns. He pretty much does it all. He'll protect your Choux and let her do her job successfully. Other characters to highlight include Deanne and Amelia. Deanne is really, really good, obviously, in the current format. She's very fast, has cleanses, barriers, attack buffs, and she also has a critical hit resistance buff, which you can use in tandem with Choux. You can kind of stack them up so that way when one ends, the other starts, and that way you'll always have up critical hit resist pretty much for the entirety of the fight, which is really, really good. Amelia is just another very good blue soul weaver in the format. Provides heals, barriers, cleanses, a combat readiness push that Choux desperately needs in order to get set up, as well as an attack buff. So you can't really go wrong with either of these two girls. Choux' good matchups are primarily going to be against AoE damage dealers as well as red damage dealers, because she is a blue damage dealer that naturally is looking to counter things, and AoE attacks obviously trigger a lot of counter attacks in this game. The two characters that you're primarily going to be playing Choux against are Bellion and Huayong. These are two characters that I think are very problematic for a lot of people, especially if you don't have a very deep box. Choux is a pretty good build and pickup character because of her matchup against both of these characters. Bellion will obviously trigger quite a number of counters from your Choux since she's all AoE attacks, which in turn could lead to some extra S2 procs, which could spell a very quick end for her. You need only watch some of the footage from the character build section to see just how fast a Bellion can evaporate against a Choux. Huayong is very much the same issue. If they're trying to focus a different character on your team and they somehow proc a counter from Choux, you might be able to outright one-shot her, especially if you have 5 focus stacks. Charlotte is another one to highlight because she is very, very similar to Bellion, can only really use AoE attacks, and she is a red unit. She's not as bulky as Bellion either, so there's a very good chance that you can outright kill her or come very close to killing her in one combo. Mercedes is another one that I want to highlight because this is a character that's very commonly played on Guild War defenses. Is usually paired with Rimuru Tempest, so you kind of got to keep that in mind. But for the most part, Mercedes falls in that same category as Charlotte. It's a lot of AoE attacks from a red damage dealer, which means there's a very good chance that Choux will counter, and her combo will almost assuredly kill Mercedes in one hit. The last two I want to talk about aren't exactly the best of matchups, but you can play Choux into these kinds of matches, which is against Ran and Peyra. Those usually signal that your opponent is trying to play some kind of cleave composition. And if you paired Choux with something like, say, Troublemaker Crozet in the back, Choux can absolutely carry a game against these style of characters. They're usually using AoEs to set up. And in the case of somebody like Peyra, when she uses her S2, it is possible to actually counter and kill her outright before she gets the extra turn and sets up Escort buff, which really kind of tanks the longevity of the cleave team. For bad matchups, the two things you obviously want to avoid are very strong green DPS, because you are naturally a blue DPS on Choux, and you don't want to fight against characters that cannot trigger counter attacks, because that's where you're getting all the value on the character. The three most common green DPS that you should probably avoid are Violet, Rimuru Tempest, and Alencia. I don't think I have to spend too much time on explaining why Violet is a bad matchup. He's the bane of almost every blue DPS's existence. 100% chance to dodge every blue attack in the game and counter with a fairly strong suit of single target attacks. Rimuru Tempest, when he's built as a glass cannon, his S3 Devour Black Flame combo can do somewhere north of like 25k after the true damage nuke, and that's, technically able to actually kill Choux in one hit. And even if you don't die. If you have critical hit resist buff on your team or any other buffs, Rimuru can just take those for his team as well. So it's just one I don't think you really want to play for the most part. Rimuru is starting to appear here more and more in the bad matchup sections for how to play because he's just really that good in a lot of scenarios. And then the last one is the newly buffed Alencia here to talk about. Genesis is very good at getting rid of any buffs that your Choux ends up having, and with the injury as well as the defense break on her S1 eradicate into trample combo, she can make either short work of Choux or drastically reduce the effectiveness of Choux since you are a health scaling character. This is one of the most common counter picks. I feel like whenever I pick Choux, this is the one that usually ends up coming out. And then the last two to highlight here are Spectre Tenebria and Landy because they are characters that sit in stealth and primarily do not trigger counterattacks. So Choux has no real way to interact with these characters, and she'll probably just sit there and do nothing and look cute and then eventually die. So yeah, definitely avoid fighting these two at all costs. And that's going to do it for how to play Choux. I recognize that it's a little bit light on build content, but I still wanted to make sure I got a video out for this character because she is very good at countering a lot of the characters that I think newer and intermediate players are struggling against, and her banner is right around the corner, so it was the perfect time to do it. If I missed anything, please let me know down in the comments below, more so than any other how to play character, because again, I've scoured everywhere that I can look, and there's really just not a lot of information out there on Choux, so I'm bound to have missed something on this. I almost guarantee it. So yeah, other than that, check out the playlist on your screen now if you want to watch more how to play guides in this same style, and as always, enjoy the rest of your day, the rest of your week, and I'll catch you all in the next one. Later now.